So a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to all of you. I'm your virtual host, Diksha Rana, and it's my pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to this eventful afternoon at 79th All India Ophthalmological Conference 2021. So ladies and gentlemen, to begin with the session, I would now like to invite Dr. Samaresh Srivastava to please moderate this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Diksha. I invite you all to this session sponsored by Alcon on advancements in cataract surgery. We have a stellar faculty today, and I hope we find time to interact, and I would encourage all questions, because it's all, most of it is new technology, and I know there's a lot of buzz about it. We all want to listen this out. We'll start. Dr. Ramamurthy is going to be the moderator for this session, but he's stuck up in another session, and he will soon join us. We'll start the session with Dr. Naren's talk on 3D visualization system, followed by, my name is Dr. Samaresh. I'll be talking on lower parameters in cataract surgery. Dr. Ramamurthy will join us in some time, and then followed in the end by Dr. Haripriya, who's going to talk to us about the active sentry or the IOP monitoring with newer phaco machines. So this is how it's going to go. Just to give you a brief introduction of Dr. Naren Shetty. Dr. Naren comes from a very prestigious institute in Bangalore called Narayan Nethralaya. I guess I know all of you know about this institute. It's very close to me because I've done a lot of my training over there, and I hold this institute very, very close to my heart. He's currently heading the cataract department and refractive lens services, and he's also the vice chairman of the entire Narayan Nethralaya group of eye hospitals. He has an extensive training, which is needless to say, from an institute like that, from Moore Eye Center in Singapore, SNEC. And he specializes in all sorts of cataracts, premium IOLs, complicated cataracts. And I mean, it's no point telling this forum, but he's given innumerable talks in all symposiums everywhere. So I guess it's always a pleasure listening to you, Dr. Naren, and I'm looking forward to this one.
Thank you for the kind words, Dr. Samaresh. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
And yes, sir.
Fantastic. Okay, on this onset, I would like to thank AIOS and Alcon for giving me this opportunity. Today, I'll be talking about 3D visualization system. Now, when you see the evolution of microscopes, it started in the early 1920s with the unicular microscope, and in the late 1920s, we had the binocular one, and the modern microscope came in the 2014. But actually, are we progressing or regressing? So this is where the Ingenuity system or the 3D system comes into picture. It started in the 2018, and it has taken care of three people. First, the consultants, then the patients, then the trainees too. So let's look at the first, the consultants. You know, as you all know, I think it's been an ophthalmic occupational hazard where a lot of us have neck pains, back pains, and so on and so forth because of constant long OTs and on the slit lamp, everywhere you're sitting in a very awkward position. But with the coming of the 3D system, it has made us so much more comfortable. As you can see in this video, this is my first surgery where I'm just sitting comfortably, my neck relaxed, back is relaxed, and I'm just looking at this screen and operating. Actually, in fact, sometimes I keep forgetting that actually I'm seeing a screen and operating. It is so much more, actually, it's really beautiful to operate on. Now, when we look at patients, how are we taking care of the patients by using the 3D system? We are using much lesser illumination, which is like a boon for the patients. They are so much more comfortable. You can see here, I'm operating with just 5% illumination. And the patients, in fact, they tell the next day that, sir, this time I was so much more comfortable. The next thing is the trainees. Oh my God! For the trainees, this is the tool to go for. So the learning curve has really shortened for trainees by using the 3D system, and you're not limited to one trainee or two trainees to look in the microscope. You can have n number of trainees just wearing cheap 3D glasses and looking at the screen, and you're good to go. And there is no discrimination between a new trainee and a senior one. Anyone from day one of OT, he can wear the glasses and look at the screen so that from day one, they get used to the depth perception, which is a very, very important factor to learn quickly and pick up your skills. So it doesn't matter what grade of cataract, you're rest assured that you can do it very comfortably with the 3D system. Here you can see me doing a soft cataract. Yes, you can do a direct chop even in soft cataract. It's just that this is I'm doing just under irrigation. The key thing is you have to do it very slowly. You can't just do a quick chop. That's when you go, cheese wire through the whole thing. And once you have done with the chopping, I think the rest of it is pretty easy. Now, when you look at the NS2 grade, again, chopping is so much more simpler. One small tip is when you get a good hold of the nucleus, please do not move your tip because when you move your tip, you create iatrogenic zonular breaks. Always keep it still once you have a good hold. Coming to the next is the intumescent cataract. In fact, this is my first case on the Ingenuity. You can do your rexus, seamlessly, just like any other standard operating microscope. And here you can see me even washing the viscoelastic just below, which is stuck on the endothelium. That is the detail that you can really beautifully appreciate on this 3D system. Now you can see that for a second, I hold the posterior capsule and then immediately release. This can happen only if two things happen. One is if there is no lag in the system, and second is if your reflexes are good. So that shows how good the 3D system is. There is absolutely no lag. You don't need to worry about it at all. Even in these kind of really bad black cataracts, you can easily operate. A small tip on operating these kind of hard cataracts is to have a clear cornea the next day is, first thing is to keep your phaco tip in the center. It should be at the iris plane. And please do not move your tip when you're pressing step 3. A lot of people have a habit of shaking the tip when they're pressing, emulsifying the piece. Please do not do it. So that way you have much more control. You know where your tip is. You know what is happening to the PC. So you'll have a very controlled environment. Now we did a study looking at comparing the ease of visualization and comfort of a surgeon and also post-operative outcomes of Ingenuity and standard operating microscope. So this was a prospective randomized single sequence study where we included all grades of cataract, which were uncomplicated, and we excluded complicated cataracts. We did clinical examinations, and the primary objective was to see how, with what ease the surgeons are able to visualize, and also how comfortable they are, and we scored them. And also the secondary endpoint was how easy was it to do the different steps of the surgery, and also look at the post-operative outcomes like corneal edema and antechamber cells. This is how the scaling was done. And when we look at the results, there was a significant decreased illumination used in the Ingenuity as compared to standard operating microscope. And also, if you see the second chart, there is a significant lower brightness used in the 3D system as compared to SOM. And also, when you look at the comfort, the surgeons were so much more comfortable operating at the lower illumination in the 3D system as compared to a standard operating microscope. But there was no difference in terms of comfort doing the different steps. There was no significant difference, be it SOM or the 3D system. All surgeons were pretty comfortable doing all steps. The surgeons had much better neck comfort while operating the Ingenuity because they were, they don't need to bend forward and look into the microscope. And when we look at the post-operative corneal edema and antechamber cells, there was no significant difference between the two groups, except one surgeon had lesser corneal edema and anterior chamber cells in the Ingenuity group as compared to SOM. So I'd like to conclude by saying all the surgeons were able to operate at a very significant lesser illumination and brightness on the Ingenuity. The patient, it provided better neck comfort for the surgeon. Also, the patients were significantly more comfortable and more cooperative, which is very important because the more they're comfortable, immediately they become more they become more cooperative, and for the surgeon also it becomes so much more easier to do the surgery. And definitely Ingenuity of the 3D system is a hands-down superior tool in training the students. And I truly believe that the 3D system is a stepping stone for the future, where when the telesurgery comes, we are already ready because we are already trained in operating this 3D system. where we're just looking at a screen and operating. So if you're so used to the 3D system, then the telesurgery will be just a cakewalk. Thank you for your time.
That was a great talk, Dr. Naren. And I think, apart from the 3D part, you brought out some very good salient points about trainees moving their phaco probes and causing occlusion breaks, which is such a big problem. And training them on that only is, I think, one of the biggest challenges. So when it comes to 3D, I saw that you're a superior surgeon. You sit superiorly and you operate.
Always temporal.
So do you find it difficult to move the TV screens from left to right, or is it smooth for you?
Actually, the thing is, what we need to do is we have to have a plan. You have to plan your OT. If you plan your OT well and you have movable beds, you just have to have, attach those wheels to your beds. And once you've attached your wheels, actually you and the TV or the microscope does not need to move. You can plan it in such a way that, the other bed, the patient is getting ready and so on and so forth, and then simply comes here. And if you're operating on only one bed, it becomes much more easier. You just have to, the patient lies and patient's ready, and you just have to tilt the bed, and then you're good to go. It needs
that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I never thought of it that way, actually, because I was moving the TV from left to right, but this makes far more sense. So I think great tip over there. Also, I just wanted to know if you feel the stereo in these 3D visualization systems is better or more exaggerated than you would normally see on a microscope?
Definitely. I mean, see, I truly believe exaggeration is better because when you exaggerate, that means, let's say if something is, you think that you're operating with this much size, you're operating with this much size, automatically, already when you're viewing through the 3D system, you're getting adjusted to the depth. Okay. So when you have a lot more space, your precision will be much more better because you know how close you can go, how much more space it has. So you immediately get tuned with your hands and eye coordination. Definitely, it is something like zooming into something and operating zoomed out. It's a simple.
Yeah, that's exactly what I also felt. Especially for trainee surgeons who find it very difficult to gauge depth. This can come. It's so unfortunate, that only the most experienced surgeons with the best resources will get this technology when it should work the other way around. The trainee should have this first, and they'll get so much to learn out of this 3D surgery.
Very true.
So do you also feel that there is a lag time? Because I sometimes felt, if the process is going on really fast, that there's a millisecond lag. But how does it bother you in a real-time scenario?
Absolutely nothing. I mean, I have timed my surgeries. In fact, I usually operate about 5 to 6 seconds per surgery, and I have not found any difference from a 3D system to this. I personally haven't. Even the fastest, because I usually operate at the high settings where I use 700 vacuum, 60 flow, and around 30 IOP. With this kind of settings also, I didn't find any kind of lagging. And I showed you a video also where, for a second, the PC just got caught in aspiration port. If there was a lag, definitely there will be a PCR. There is no doubt only about it. But because there was no lag, instantaneously I could, act accordingly and then release the posterior capsule.
I think that's something that we all have to understand, that with it, not all 3D systems are the same, and certain companies, it all depends on how good your processing and your camera equipment is, because that lag time is going to make all the difference. So a homegrown 3D apparatus will not work for a surgery. It might work for you to show a 3D surgery post-operatively, but during live surgery, it's very important that any lag can cause a problem. So that's when good companies are investing so heavily on reducing that apparent lag time, which I think again a very good point. But I wish we get rid of this TV. If we can get rid of the TV and get some sort of glasses where you don't really have to have another big equipment, it would be a much bigger advantage for us.
I think very true. In fact, this is the first suggestion when they came with the 3D system. I had told them, in fact, we can have a VR headset and also have one secondary camera, because it's not just we require a view on the eye, because sometimes we need to view our surroundings, once in a while, to see where our hand is, or sometimes, to see, whatever it is. Absolutely. So if you have a camera on the VR headset where it's, have, a wide field camera where you can see things around, so you can switch to any of it. Either you get into the surgical field or you can look outside. I mean, I feel it's the way to go, but I mean, they're a little bit struggling in terms of the depth perception. I have no idea, but I feel that is the way to go.
No,
So
I think this is where it boils down to. No, we went from microscopes to TV, and from TV we are going to move on to VR and then to AR, where you'll even see the diagnostics flipping in front of your eyes while you're operating. So I think that day is not far. Should happen. Yeah. I think. Thank you, Dr. Naren. It was a great talk and a very great interactive discussion with you on this.
So much. Thank you.
I think we'll move on. The next talk is by me. I'm Dr. Samresh, working at Raghudeep Eye Hospital, Jaipur and Ahmedabad. And I'll be talking to you on the use of low parameters during cataract surgery, more so with the newer machines, the new phaco machines that are in the market, and how you can optimize this, use and optimize your surgery, optimize your machines to get the best outcomes by delivering the least possible damage to the patient's eyes. And with this, I want to highlight that, for us today, in today's date and time, there are two sorts of systems. One is a gravity-fed conventional system, which is what we've all trained on, and most practices even now use gravity-based infusions. And non-gravity based infusion systems. The first one, the original ones, were forced infusion or a fish pump, which was propagated and was used quite extensively a few years back. And now a newer system of surgery called the Centurion Vision System, which I've been enjoying for the past 5 or 6 years and has been there for quite a while, which uses a newer concept of what is known as active fluidics, and I think it's patented by Alcon. And so I think we're going to discuss how and why these fluid parameters are important and what impact they do on the eye actually. And why should we move from doing a surgery and finishing a cataract surgery to now looking at the finer nuances of looking at these parameters and trying to fine tune them. So this started with our institute back in 2010, where our group published, we looked at two parameters, the low parameters and the high parameters. And when we say high parameters, we mean few things. We mean a high bottle height. We mean a high aspiration flow rate of 40 cc or above, a high vacuum, because a high bottle height is going to get fluid into the eye. A high vacuum will get the fluid out of the eye, and an appropriate phacoemulsification power. So we defined a high parameter group and a low parameter group where we use significantly lower parameters. And we found out that if you use a high bottle height and significantly high parameters, you cause more corneal edemas and more anterior segment inflammation on the first postoperative day. And I think this is very simple to understand. If you cause more turbulence, you're obviously going to cause more blood barrier to break down, and thereby you're going to cause more inflammation. Then we went ahead, we also found out that, if we are using high parameter group, we actually, with higher flow rate and high bottle height, we increase the IOP of the patient inside the eye during the surgery to as high as about 85-90 millimeters of mercury. Now, if you increase the bottle height, the gravity is going to cause that much fluid to go inside. So again, it's very easy to understand why the IOP would go up. But if you have a high IOP in any eye, but more so in an eye which has pre-existing damage, like a myopic eye, or a guy with preoperative retinal detachments, or eye with glaucoma, it's going to cause significantly more inflammation, more edematous corneas, but also significantly more damaged eyes in terms of other segments, other parts of the eye, simply because you're pushing in more fluid in less time in the eye. So this is just to show you what we did. We actually put a transducer probe in the eye when we performed a surgery. Now this is the high parameter group. So notice the bottle height is 120, flow rate is set at 40, and the vacuum is set at 300. Now real time, the machine is monitoring the IOP, and notice how the graph goes up and down and fluctuates between anywhere between 60 and 110. And this is the onslaught the eye is facing. There's so much turbulence happening inside the anterior chamber while phaco is being performed. And this was a study done well before the Centurion Vision System came. This was, about 12 years back, this study was done. And compare it to what we defined as a low parameter group, where we used a bottle height of about 75-80, a flow rate which was exactly half, about 20. Notice that the maximum IOP hit during this surgery was about 60 millimeters of mercury. But what is more important, that there was no fluctuations and there was no up and down in the graph, and the graph was a tranquil graph. And that led us to understand that maybe it's important to understand these parameters and try to step down on your foot pedal so as to not only give a good surgical performance, but also help these patients recover better in the post-operative phase. A far more tranquil environment. And this is just a comparative, putting side by side a high parameter group, and look at this graph here, and compare it with the low parameter group with an IOP of 60 and a bottle height, corresponding bottle height of about 80 centimeters, and compare it to the high parameter group, which is a flow rate of about 840 and a bottle height going up to as high as 120. Basics are basics. So we have to understand in terms of fluidics in phaco that input has to balance output. And that is how you control the entire surgery and prevent any surge and any complication during phacoemulsification. What is your input? In a gravity fed system, it's a bottle height. And what is the output? The output is the flow rate, which determines how fast you pull out fluid from the eye. And there's obviously a component of wound leak. So you have to understand that it is not the phaco energy, it is not the vacuum which pulls the fluid out, but the flow rate which determines how fast you will pull the fluid out of the eye. We also try to understand what these high parameters would do in the back of the eye or in the posterior compartment of the eye. So this is just to orient you. This is a cadaveric eye where we dissected out the Berger space, which is the space between the posterior lens capsule and the anterior vitreous face. Once we cleaved a space between those two components, we filled up this entire cavity with triamcinolone, preservative-free triamcinolone, because we wanted a sono-opaque medium so that we could see these Berger space. Then when we put a phaco probe in the eye, we move from no irrigation to irrigation, which is foot position 0 to foot position 1. And notice how this entire complex moves front and back. When we raise the parameters to a high parameter, and notice how we increase the bottle height and subsequently we increase the flow rate to 40. When we go from foot position 0, the whole thing moves anteriorly, and the moment we hit irrigation, there is a huge trampolining, and this big pressure fluctuation tends to happen inside the cavity. And notice that at some point in time, the entire vitreous face, the anterior vitreous face ruptured. So anteriorly, if you look at through a microscope, the posterior capsule was intact, but the anterior vitreous face ruptured and the entire vitreous was stained by these triamcinolone particles because of the pocket being broken down. And this led us to understand a lot of times when we see inflammation happening in eyes post-operatively, inflammation happening in eyes which have diabetes, which have vein occlusions, and we find macular edema is progressing, it's probably because despite an anterior posterior capsule being intact, the broken down anterior vitreous face causes all that inflammation and prostaglandins to migrate posteriorly and eventually causes this breakdown of anterior and posterior compartmentalization. So it's very important that we monitor this IOP throughout the procedure and make sure we keep it under control. Active fluidics, the one that we have with these machines, new machines like Centurion now, help us do that. They allow customization of IOP and optimal delivery so that you have a very, very controlled environment. Just to show you, for those who haven't seen the machine, there is no more bottle over here, and notice how the bottle has gone inside the machine, and there's a bag pressure sensor which actively compensates and pushes fluid inside the anterior chamber. Another good thing with the machine is now you can calibrate the machine to the patient's eye level, and this patient's eye level becomes the 0 level, and everything else, even in a gravity fed surgery on a Centurion, which is an option, you can use this to calibrate the machine. So it gives you excellent control. And I'll just show you the same graph on active fluidics. Notice over here that if you've set the IOP at 32 and we are measuring it, the IOP is being maintained at 30 to 40 millimeters of mercury in the eye. More importantly, notice that when we are doing the quadrant removal or fragment removal for a dense cataract, and we've set the IOP to 40 and appropriately we've set the flow rate at 20, notice that it's an efficient cutting. Notice the chamber is extremely dead stable and the graph is right where it's supposed to be, and it's a very, very tranquil environment. If you look at a gravity fed system on the same machine, on an infinity vision system, notice the graph fluctuates. Every time you break the occlusion during a quadrant removal, you're going to cause an influx or surge of fluid inside the phaco probe. And that is, if you notice over here, and if you're a purist, you'll see that even the iris will flutter ever so slightly. And those are the chamber fluctuations that are visible on this graph over here. If you compare it to an active system, the active system is actively compensating and pushing fluid and avoiding any chamber collapse. So if you look at the same pupil margin again in this eye, you will notice that even when an IOP of 40, which corresponds to a bottle height of 50, there is absolutely no flutter in the eye. And you are taking out this nuclear fragment so smoothly from the eye without any problem whatsoever. When it comes to lens removal, we have to understand that there are synergistic and antagonistic factors. You know, your fragmentation and energy will try to push the nucleus away when your aspiration will try to pull the nucleus back into the phaco probe. So again, just to show you, on a Centurion vision system with lower parameters, which means a bottle height of about, an IOP of 30, which corresponds to a bottle height of about 40, 42, a flow rate which is low at 20, and an appropriate vacuum. Notice when we pull the nuclear fragment in the center, not much manipulation is required. You don't even need the second instrument. You can just hold and push your foot pedal down, and the nucleus will proactively completely disappear into the phaco probe without you doing any manipulations whatsoever. And this is the beauty of good fluidics in any machine. When you're actually testing the grit of the machine, you want to see how much the machine can do without you trying to move a finger over there. And notice the second instrument is on a side, and the phaco is completed so smoothly. We did a high-speed study where we put a high-speed camera and we recorded what actually happens when we're doing an emulsification of a fragment. And notice the second instrument is dead steady over there. The phaco probe, particularly the torsional delivery of energy, is so good that it completely shears off the nuclear fragment. And there's a sort of a turbulent movement where the whole nuclear fragment sort of breaks down on its own without any second instrument maneuver and is completely absorbed. I'm just going to finish off with a case over here showing you how a dense cataract emulsification is, we all know it's a challenge for us. We all know that division is the biggest challenge. Removal is the second biggest problem. We use various techniques. We use direct chop or modified stop and chop techniques. I'm just going to show this lady, 78-year-old, with a post-P. I will show you. This is a classical black cataract. It's not a good cataract for anybody, however senior the surgeon may be. But this is where you test the machine to its real capacity. Notice that I have a phaco tip which is slightly more exposed than normal because I like to bury it right in the core when I'm chopping it, because I like to see the tip disappear so that I know that there's a good hold on the nuclear material. I am chopping a dense black cataract with a vacuum of 600 plus, but my IOP is only 40 and my flow rate is only 20. And notice there is such a good hold that I'm able to complete the entire chop. Sometimes you may not be able to do that, and what I normally would do is bury the probe at a deeper plane on the same area and go ahead and complete the chop over there. Notice over here that this is a good classical example of a direct chop that was possible due to two things. One, excellent chamber control. There was no post-occlusion surge, which is a classical problem when you're chopping a dense cataract. The moment your occlusion breaks, your entire chamber tends to collapse, which is not what happened. And we also use the multi-level chop technique to a great advantage to be able to divide the base plate, because until you divide the plate in a black cataract, it's highly unlikely you'll be able to take out the cataract quite intelligently in a better fashion. We published this multi-level chop technique again, and I'm not going to dwell over this because it's not the point of concern today. But once you've chopped the nucleus, fragment removal becomes the next big challenge, because in a black cataract, fragment removal can cause surges to happen during the surgery. And again, this is to highlight how you can play with lower fluidics. If you have your input and output, and it doesn't really work with Sejurin, but it will work with any good machine. First and foremost, basics are basics, and please use dispersive viscoelastics to prevent damage to the corneal endothelium. But notice over here how my IOP is set, or my bottle height is low at 40-50. I'm using a flow rate of 20. Vacuum, I'm using appropriately around 300 to 50 vacuum. And I'm using a good amount of energy, a torsional energy of about a 70. And if you have a dense cataract, it's a great idea to avoid coring into the nuclear material and to divide this. Once you've caught it, notice how I'm using my second instrument to just ever so slightly nudge this fragment away from the eye, from the phaco probe, so that there's no complete occlusion. And with good torsional energy, you are able to emulsify this lens completely and it disappears. And this is just to show you that if you use your parameters right, post-operatively, you can have really nice, good, clean corneas, and you really don't have to worry about good outcomes. Just to finish off, even not only the dense cataracts, but even in a soft cataract, this is a post-RKI. This is an RKI with a high myopia. Notice that we are, I'm using a 4-quadrant technique in this because it's soft cataract. But my bottle height, if it were to be bottle height, would be about a 30. My flow rate is set to 10 right now, and it's gone at 20 because of fragment removal. But even at an IOP of 20, which is a bottle height of about 30 to 40, notice how, because of active fluidics, the chamber is so stable. Because these myopic eyes are the ones where you will see the entire chamber collapse and the pupil go in and out. But even in these eyes, notice that there is such a good triangle environment. The other one very important reason why I don't want a high IOP or a high bottle height, and particularly with RK eyes, is these RK incisions might open up like a zipper, which is something all surgeons would have seen, who has operated RK, that there is no predictability to these incisions. But if you can keep the IOP low, or if you keep the globe less inflated, chances are that your incisions will not open up during the surgery. I tend to use a bimanual for my cortical removal. And again, if you notice in a bimanual, I keep the bottle height low or an IOP low, and we are able to finish off the surgery with an elegant fashion because we were able to control the fluidity. So I don't think it's right to say one formula works for all. One has to understand that fluid parameters are very dynamic. You have to understand your machine and use the fluid parameters. Try to go low because you might take a little longer to finish the surgery, but the post-operative outcomes and long-term outcomes in terms of endothelial loss are lesser. It gives you far more ergonomic comfort, especially for early surgeons, because they don't know how things are happening. So, while senior surgeons can get away because they've learned with experience, early surgeons should go slow on their machines. And of course, with these newer machines, there is so much more greater safety, and like I was saying in Dr. Naren's talk, it's the early surgeon who needs to adopt a better machine, because that will make the surgeries far more predictable. So good surgeons and experienced and veterans can do away with even poorer machines. But I guess if you can have an access to a good platform and good knowledge on this, it will go ahead and saving all cataracts for everyone. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, Dr. Samresh. I mean, really enjoyed your videos and all. Is it okay if I can ask you a question?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can just tell a few instances at like what type of cataract or what kind of situation would you, I mean, where operating at a lower IOP is really beneficial?
So I think that's a great question. I think for me, my IOP is set at 40. So even for any cataract, I don't go beyond 40. Because now with Infinity, my bottle height was set at 80 for fragment removal, but I am getting away with an IOP of 40 for all my cataracts, because the Centurion is pushing in fluid and keeping the chamber stable. If I have a myopic eye, or if I have an eye which has a tendency towards floppy iris, I tend to drop down my IOP from 40 to say 30, and I will finish my entire surgery at 30 IOP. But I appropriately also reduce my flow rate in these eyes to go slow, so that there's no turbulence in the eye. But 40 is my upper limit. So I haven't even tested the machine above 40 ever since I have it.
That's fantastic. I totally second everything you have just said. I think in terms of phaco machines, I don't think so. Alcon has competition right now. As of now, I mean, no matter what kind of cataract, what kind of like bad situation, you can really get away if you're very sloppy on that day also, because the machine does most of the thinking and most of the correction. And and especially even with so we have the active-centric handpiece added to the active fluidics. I mean now I'm like every time 20, that's it, it's fixed 20, and then my vacuum is 600 60 flow. I mean, it's an amazing machine. I would just like to add one more point is, I think even in posterior polar cataract, I feel it's really good thing, because it's very important to have very controlled chamber, because any kind of a snap can easily open up the posterior capsule. I feel this really works well in these kinds. And also one point is the patient. I mean, patient really enjoys it, because especially like you said in myopes, suddenly, the chamber, because of the reverse pupillary block, the chamber deepens, immediately patient just jumps out of the bed. I think this is a beautiful tool where the patient doesn't feel whether a machine is entered into his eye, because you're just maintaining the normal IOP of his eye. You enter, you finish, and you come out. So the patient just, every time he asks me, is it done? I mean, like, wow, fantastic. So I feel that's really the big plus point between, of this active-centric and anticentric handpiece. Definitely.
I think a great point, Dr. Naren. For any cataract, trampolining is not a good idea. So you have polar particularly, because polars, I encourage all the junior surgeons any listening to at least do a sort of viscoelastic exchange to maintain the chamber. But if you can get away without any fluctuations whatsoever, it's probably a miraculous surgery. And like you said, it's a no-brainer. So, if I have to go to another machine, like Dr. Naren said, he's operating at 600 vacuum, which is an insanely high vacuum for, any other machine. And if you do a 600 vacuum with a 50 bottle height, you are 110% going to rupture your posterior capsule if you're not an experienced surgeon. But with this, you don't have to think about it. It's like, you can be doing something else in your mind. You can be discussing something else with your assistant, and you will still finish the surgery, and you will not even feel that slightest flutter in the eye. I think it's brilliant. One more thing that I learned, particularly for myopic eyes, and the fact that you said when the whole thing moves posterior, there is pain which bothers the patient completely, is I normally ask my assistant to drop down the IOP to say 20 when I put my irrigation in the eye, and then ask him to slowly build it up. So that slow build up causes the ciliary body tension to build up slow, and the pain is, I think, a little more tolerable. Which I think even for a gravity fed system, you can start at a bottle height of 30, enter, and ask your assistant to raise the bottle height to 80, and the patient will bear it better.
I see, that's a very good point. Actually, the Alcon system has built in this feature. Doesn't matter which IOP you have, it's got this IOP ramp. So like even if you have a higher, slowly it increases. But that's a very good important tip, which if you're not operating on Alcon or active-centric handpiece, you can just do this. One more simple tip is, let's say, okay, now you've filled the chamber, you have finished your X-rays, you're about to take your phaco machine inside. So you take a phaco machine inside without pressing irrigation first, okay? Then what you can do is take your dialer, just lift the iris a little bit, and then turn on the irrigation. So this way, you really prevent any kind of a reverse pupillary block and then the chamber deepening. This is also one small tip which
I think that's a great point. And these small things matter. At the end of the day, you will realize that small things will make the surgery good for the patient or the experience horrible for the patient. And that I think is a great. Slowly start paying attention to small details. So if I think Dr. Ramamurthy sir hasn't joined. Is Dr. Haripriya madam here? Has she joined?
Yeah, both of us are joining shortly, sir. So we may continue our discussion, no problem. All
right. So I think in that case, I think it gives us an opportunity to discuss, a lot of these. So how do you find just between? Okay, before I forget, I wanted to bring about these subtle points. I hear a lot of these doctors saying that a lot of these companies have marketing things where they have a remote for control of the machine and all that. But again, it's so important, because if you have so much control for a surgeon who's operating, building up that IOP RAM, like you said, or building up the bottle height, even with the remote, is a slow controlled fashion compared to a normal machine. So even subtle points are very, very important when you come down to the quality of surgery that a patient experiences. What's your take, Dr. Naren?
No, definitely, I would agree. See, that's what I keep feeling, that we are, I think, are spoiling our fellows because they keep operating on these machines, and when they go out, they go outside. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. So I feel, I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing, but I mean, sometimes always, if you have the opportunity, make sure you operate on all. When I was learning, I used to operate, I should not be picky because, if I wanted to, I could have chosen what machine I want, but I should just leave it randomly. Whatever machine is ready, which is free, I just get into that OT and try to operate. It's very important to not get used to one thing, just to keep your, you should be on your toes so that you're more alert, because these kind of machines really spoil you, because most of the time you'll start daydreaming then when you're doing a surgery. So you don't realize how you finished the surgery.
And with things becoming so seamless, with the Centurion Vision system integrating to the Femto Cataract, integrating to your Varian system, there's literally a seamless flow of knowledge that's happening between the machines, and so you become a little more complacent.
So true. Dr. Samresh, if it's okay with you, I have a session at 12:30. I'm a little late.
Is it
okay to enjoy another session?
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, Dr. Naren.
So, Mr. Manoj, if you are waiting for,
he's joining shortly, sir. Yeah, he's joining shortly.
All right. So I can in the meantime discuss a case scenario, because I think if there are attendees, they will like to see a case discussion.
Sure. Please go ahead, sir. Sir, just one question from many of the surgeons, that those people who are shifting to Centurion, maybe from Infinity. So This is the ideal IOP which you shown, but what is the IOP which people should start from if immediately they are shifting from other machine to Centurion?
Yeah, so see, the first thing you want to do is, if you're shifting to a Centurion, or if even if you're not shifting in their older machines, try to work at a lower bottle height. So if your idea is to fix the bottle height at the beginning of the surgery, it's not a good idea, because it's very important to understand that every stage of surgery has a different requirement. Sculpting has a different requirement, chopping has a different requirement, and nucleus fragment removal has a different requirement. And if you understand these three things, you will understand why you need to change this. When you are sculpting, you don't want your chamber to be very deep, because otherwise you'll have to put your phaco probe down to be able to operate and make that sculpt, which is very, very difficult and ergonomically difficult, particularly in myopic eyes. If you drop down your bottle height, your chamber will become less deeper, and thereby you will be able to do sculpting very nicely. So if you're sculpting as your first step, you want a low bottle height, you want a low aspiration flow rate, because you're not holding anything for suction, but you want a good energy. So that's your parameters. So if I were to do a grade 3 cataract, I would put a bottle height of 50 centimeters, 40 centimeters. I'd put a suction flow rate of about 14, 15, and I'd put a bottle high, and I'll put my vacuum just enough to take out the nuclear fragment. When you are chopping, now you need vacuum, because you want to hold the nuclear material. So vacuum becomes the most important thing. Again, bottle height is not important, because you don't want a very high bottle height, because it will break the chop away. So again, I work at 40, 50 bottle height, but I'll keep my vacuum appropriate to the cataract. For any machine, this is not even for Centurion. You will put 300 vacuum for a grade 3 cataract, 400 for a grade 4 cataract. But when you're doing a quadrant removal, that is the time you want the whole nuclear fragment to be away from the corneal endothelium, and that is probably the only time I will raise my bottle height to whatever bottle height. I normally would operate at an 80 bottle height in a gravity fed system, but I see that a lot of people are operating at 120, 110, and sometimes they even make a hole and put the bottle above the roofs, which is not a great idea. So if you have to increase the bottle height because you are putting a flow rate to be very high and you're sucking out so much fluid from the eye. So if you first thing you want to do as a surgeon is drop your flow rate to 25, 30, 20 ideally, and then slowly keep on reducing your bottle height, and you'll realize that at 80 bottle height and a 20 flow rate, your system is going to be a stable system. And I'm talking for an infinity, every machine will be in and around there. Once you're comfortable with that, and you shift into a Centurion, you can safely work at a 40 IOP, 50 IOP, and because of active compensation, there will be no flutter at all. But I see no reason to go above 40, 50 IOP because then it is counterproductive. The reason why I invested in so much in the machine and for chamber stability is going to be negated by you raising the IOP because it's only for mental satisfaction and it really won't do much in improving your surgical performance. So I hope I'm making myself clear with this, Mr. Manoj. Are you there, Mr. Manoj? So I'll just hold the fort and try to pull out a case in the meantime so that we can discuss based on that case also. Just give me 1 second to look out a case. Yeah, so this is a nice case. So this is just to show you, how techniques and technology work in tandem with each other. So this is a very dense cataract. It's a dense, mature cataract, and it's about a 4.5 millimeters pupil. And notice now we created this patient wanted to go ahead with a femto cataract, and we created a Rexis with a femto cataract because that's pretty much the only thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to do a chop because anyways there was so much of release of gas bubbles, and if the pupil would come down any further, it would mar my surgical performance. Once I did that, I always tend to stain all my capsules. Notice the capsule here is anyways floating out, but I would tend to stain all the capsules with trypan blue just to make sure that there's no loose tags, particularly in these mature or intumescent cataracts, because they can give away and rupture. And I think this again is a very important thing for all surgeons, particularly for young surgeons, is to get acquainted and get comfortable with one or the other pupil dilatation devices. I tend to find the Greischeber's hooks particularly as the easiest to use because the skill required is not as bad, and these hooks are very forgiving. And even though I could have gotten away with a phaco, hopefully in a cataract like this, I always tend to tend away my pupil because I want to give the best surgical performance and keep a full visibility going. And so I put 5 hooks in this eye to keep my entire visibility. Notice over here that, in a patient with a dense cataract, a cataract of this magnitude, I'm using an IOP of 40, which translates to a bottle height of about 45, 50. My flow rate is 20, which is something that I wanted to emphasize on, but my vacuum, like Dr. Naren brought about in his talk, is about 600. But even at a 600 vacuum, notice that when I'm breaking the occlusion over here, notice there is no surge, there is no flutter of the chamber. And this is the kind of control one wants. You find it difficult to handle a black cataract and one wants to convert to an SICS or an ACCE because half the time we are not sure whether we'll be able to crack the nucleus. And when we are cracking, half the time we are not sure whether we are going to have a chamber surge the moment the occlusion break happens. But notice how we are, so, this is a multi-level chop. So we chop over here and then we go down and we chop again. And we were able to take out this entire, break down this entire nucleus so nicely. So these are my parameters: 600 vacuum, 20 flow rate, an IOP of 50. And at that, I'm doing a quadrant removal. In a quadrant removal with any machine, be it longitudinal, be it torsional, it's a very good idea to avoid complete occlusion. So notice that my phaco tip is bent towards the side because it's a balanced tip. And notice that I'm trying to proactively avoid complete occlusion. So I don't want to hear that ting, 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 ting closure sound, because the moment you have a complete occlusion, your phaco becomes inefficient. Now I'm topping it with visco to prevent any damage to the endothelium. But what happens in complete occlusion is that your phaco probe is vibrating and you're emulsifying. But because there's occlusion, there is no aspiration. And because there's no aspiration, your phaco probe will heat up and it will cause wound site burns. So the moment I hear a sound of ting ting or an occlusion, I'll use my second instrument to throw away that fragment and start my phaco again. And that's, I think, a very, very important thing because I've burned so many corneas in my learning phase because I had no idea what I was doing. For my fragment removal, again, my preferred technique is to use a bimanual because it gives me more control, and I want to play as less as possible with the main incision as possible. So with this technique and with good parameters, you are able to manage all sorts of cataracts, good or bad. And I think with this, I'll like to invite Dr. Ramamurthy sir. Welcome, sir. to the session.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about the delay. I mean,
so all yours now, sir.
can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir.
My sincere apologies for my late arrival. I just stuck with a couple of other halls. I'm sure Samresh and Naren would have kept everyone occupied with their excellent presentations. I'm going to be talking about the difficult and the not so difficult situations where we try using technology to make the performance of the phacoemulsification quite easy. Let me start out with a reasonably hard cataract, emphasizing on certain basic principles that I always follow. One of the things is to create an adequate rhexis, irrespective of the kind of instrument that you have access to. About 5 to 5.5 millimeters rhexis is what I aim at, and especially in the nasal temporal direction, it should be adequate so that there's enough area for you to create a chop. And that's a hydrodissection just being done in one quadrant because I'm seeing the nucleus moving forward. It's extremely important that you make sure that the lens is completely mobile. Now, coming on to the settings as such, I use a vacuum about 600. As you can see, the intraocular pressure is just at 30. Initially, just the cortex and the epinucleus that's removed. And then subsequently today, I always create a small trench in the subincisional area. I strongly believe that irrespective of the kind of grade of cataract that you're dealing with, this gives an excellent access to the meat of the nucleus. And once I get a purchase on that, I bust the segment in, and then you can see my vacuum goes up to almost 600 when I have come to foot position 2. And that's when I initiate a crack. It's extremely important that you make sure that this crack goes all the way right through and right up to the posterior aspect of the nucleus. And that's exactly, sometimes it might have to be, you might have to release and again regrasp and do a multi-level chopping. And as you can see, this happens in a very methodical manner. Usually in a hard cataract like this, I either chop them into 8 pieces or 6 pieces. In this case, each heminucleus is going to be chopped into 3 pieces. I'm almost done with one heminucleus. And as you can see over here, with each of these, I make sure that it's coming all the way to the center. And the ability to do this with the kind of performance that the Centurion gives you, you can see the vacuum going almost up to 600 and kind of in spite of the intraocular pressure being just at 30. And this is the kind of safety that this machine is able to offer us. And there have been cases where, as I'll be showing subsequently, you can go even up to 700 plus. And with the active fluidis, with the active Sentry, you have inherent confidence in the machine's ability to control all these settings. And you can see there is hardly a flutter, and the entire procedure goes ahead in a very controlled manner. When it comes to chopping, as you can see in my settings on the left, it's essentially longitudinal power that I employ, hardly using any torsional power, because I feel that gives me an excellent hold onto the nucleus. And you can almost, chopping is complete, and you can find that the phaco power that has been used, which is almost entirely within the capsular bag, is quite low. And now it's the aspiration of the nucleus fragments that is kind of being created, and it's 80% power now on a linear mode, and it's happening in the supracapsular region. Though it's in the anterior chamber, I try to keep it tilted as low as much as possible. It is again the confidence on this instrument where there's very little movement of the phaco tip, and I allow the fragments to just flow into the tip, keeping it oriented in a sideways manner, and sometimes even the bevel can be pointed downwards. That's because in spite of the extreme settings that we have the confidence that the turbulence that is created by this is quite less. Going on to another scenario, I often feel that it's not competitive, but complementary technologies, laser and phacoemulsification. And this particular hard cataract has been laser treated. And here I again create a trench along the trench that has been earlier created with the laser. And essentially here it's a question of creating the division along the segments that have already been created. What has been done in this particular case is to divide the nucleus into 6 segments along with a certain amount of softening of the nucleus. And each of these segments that have been pre-created with the laser, that's how we are going to divide it. Subsequently, you can see this again proceeding in a very methodical manner, almost exactly the same as you would see in the previous case. The only difference being, because it has been pre-treated with the laser, as you'd see finally, the amount of CDE that's used is almost half of that was used in the earlier case. But again, it's not the number of the CDE that alone matters. As you can see over here, most of the division happened in the endocapsular area, and it's only the evacuation of the nucleus that takes place in the anterior chamber, that also in the supracapsular zone. And again, the usage of power as such is quite less. I'm using almost 600 vacuum with power of just about 60%. Unfortunately, in this particular case, the overlay is not visible, but you can see the CD is quite low even for an extremely hard cataract like this. And though it's pre-treated with laser, it's sub 10. That tells you that it's more the fluidics which is working very well. And as I emphasized in the previous case, you could see the phaco tip being held in a sideways manner, allowing the nucleus fragment to flow in. This is a case of a hyperope of a plus 28 diopters, a fairly shallow anterior chamber. The patient had suboptimal visual outcome in the other eye because the cornea being a little hazy. And as you can see over here, there's a little older video where I'll be using more extreme parameters. Now I come to believe that 600 is the right way to go, and I use about 30 millimeters as my 30 millimeters as my intraocular pressure. Here, as you can see, in this extremely shallow anterior chamber, I think it was just about 2.2 millimeters. I'm using a vacuum of 700 plus, an intraocular pressure of 60, and it's extremely important in these cases that you get adequate incisions. Even if I'm using the laser, I prefer creating my incisions with the keratome so that it's more controlled. And I like to see that small bleed over there. That tells me that it's right at the limbus. And again, as I emphasized in the earlier case, in these situations, it's extremely important to get an adequate rhexis about 5.5 millimeter. Shallow anterior chamber, you could see the tendency for the iris to prolapse, and making sure that there is an adequate hydrodissection that has been done, and removal of the whatever little cortex and epinucleus is there, then subsequently buzzing the phaco tip in. The only difference here is that in spite of the high vacuum, I did not create the initial trench. As I said, this is an earlier video of mine. That's the reason you see that there is a certain amount of tendency for the nucleus to rotate. I find that now today in these hard cataracts, if I create an initial trench and bury my phaco tip into the meat of the nucleus, then the control that you get is quite exquisite. And as you can see, you can, even in the shallow anterior chamber, in a fairly elderly gentleman with a fairly hard cataract, I'm able to use a vacuum of 700. Of course, the intraocular pressure is slightly higher, but now with my experience with the Centurion platform, with the incorporation of the Active Sentry, I would not hesitate using 30 millimeters of intraocular pressure, even in a situation like this. Though vacuum, I believe 600 is a better way to go, and I usually keep my aspiration in the range of 34. I believe that leads on to better corneas in the postoperative day one, rather than a more extreme situation that you're seeing here. Essentially, the reason I incorporated this video is to show that the machine has the capability to handle even situations like this, whereas with a shallow anterior chamber with a fairly hard cataract with a vacuum of 700, you can again, there's hardly any movement of the phaco tip over here. And even during the last fragment evacuation, there is no step down that is necessary because of the turbulence that is created with the phaco platform that we have here, because of the kind of fluidics that's there, the active fluidics, the balance tip, the Active Sentry incorporation, which I'm sure the other speakers would have dwelt upon in greater detail. I'm just going to be showing you videos on this. It gives me greater confidence to deal with any grade of cataract. What about going on to another extreme situation, a high myope, just +1 diopter intraocular lens, post-RD situation? Obviously, it's going to be, the ocular rigidity is going to be extremely low in this situation. and because of which the tendency for the intraocular change it to be very deep is always there. As you can see over here I kept my intraocular pressure as 20 and vacuum at 600. Here there is also an active sentry overlay, which gives a further level of safety. And I find that the active sentry actuation in these cases, I've seen the end of this case, is even though the cataract is not very hard, because of the blockade of the tip that happens in these cases, you would find that the active sentry gets actuated quite often, and that gentle push essentially enables reorientation of the nucleus fragments and the phaco emulsification to proceed in a more methodical manner. Again, as far as the IP is concerned, when it is chopping, I do not switch on the IP. When it comes to quadrant evacuation, the IP is activated so that it again enables proper orientation of the nucleus fragments. As I said earlier, in this situation again, it's a distinct division of the nucleus fragment in the capsular bag into 4 quadrants. And in spite of it being a forced RD case with a +1 diopter intraocular lens being implanted, because I'm using a very gentle intraocular pressure of 20, the tendency for the chamber to deepen for reverse pupillary capture to occur is extremely low. And even though the pupil comes down a little bit towards the end of the surgery, you can see that without any movement of the nucleus phaco tip, the nucleus fragment literally hugs the tip and gently flows it in. Again, the orientation of the phaco tip in the sideways direction is because of the confidence that we have and the tendency for the protection that this technology offers as far as the posterior capsular integrity is concerned. And that's the end of surgery. And as you can see over here, the intraocular lens has been implanted. I just want to show you the last frame because it's you can see the RD buckle there, and because it's a extremely low power, it's a 3-piece lens that's going in, and extremely good results. And as I told you earlier, the active sentry actuation happens even in a situation like this whenever there is complete occlusion. In a situation like this where the soft cataract has been pre-treated with the laser, there's a slight variation in the technique that I have today, in the sense that with the down-up technique, I remove the nucleus, then I just hydrate within the segmentation that has been created, both in the horizontal and in the sideways direction. And I feel that the fluid wave literally splits up the nucleus into small segments. The pizza pies that have been created earlier with the laser is completely divided by this maneuver. And what you find over here, you could please look at the energy level. There's absolutely the CD is 0 right through. Active sentry is again used in this particular case. And I'm just picking up the fragments here. Again, the vacuum is about 600. The intraocular pressure is slightly on the higher side. I could manage this case even with a 30 millimeters of intraocular pressure. And this is, you can see the entire procedure being proceeding very methodically. There's hardly any sculpting or any chopping that's necessary because of the initial hydro division happening along the areas where the laser cleavage happened. Is already split up into multiple segments. And as I was mentioning in the earlier case, you can see even in a very soft cataract where the energy level, you say the CDE is just 0, the ASM, the active sentry, has been actuated 14 times. It's simply because whenever there is a tendency for the phaco tip to be getting completely occluded, then there is an impulse that is coming from the phaco handle itself that essentially precludes complete occlusion and offers a certain extra level of safety. This is just a hybrid tip that I'm using here. That's another great tool that Alcon has introduced, and you can see here that's a polymer that's there on the tip. Otherwise, it's the balance tip is exactly maintained. Is essentially good for grade 2, grade 3 cataracts. If it's an extremely hard cataract, maybe this may not function quite well. But as you can see, the chopping of the nucleus is happening in a very controlled manner. And as far as the protection for the posterior capsule is concerned, this modification of the tip offers another dimension. I think whenever I'm faced with a softer nucleus, especially if it's a clear lens extent, etc., this might this might be a good tool to use. As you can see, even a certain amount of polishing of the posterior capsule is possible with this. A very short video showing you usage of this polymer tip and posterior capsule getting caught. I'm not moving the tip, but as you can see, no damage is done. And as you can see, those wrinkles are just in the posterior capsule. It's not a rent, and I'm able to go ahead and complete the surgery. I think the hybrid tip is another good addition that we have over here. And as far as moderate size pupil size is concerned, the basic tenets that I follow is essentially the same. And it's important that I use pupil expansion devices only when the nucleus is extremely hard, or I'm faced with a situation is that when the pupil is less than 3 millimeters. In a situation like this where it's about 4 millimeters, I just run the rexis beyond the rexis margin. And as you can see, again, the simple trains that I'm creating in the subincisional area, then subsequently almost using the same parameters, 600 vacuum, 30 IOP. It's because of the lack of turbulence, in spite of the fact that the pupil is quite small. I have the confidence that the iris margin is not going to get caught, and I'm able to complete the phacoemulsification using exactly the same maneuvers that I used in the earlier cases. It is the extreme placidity of the environment that this instrument creates that we are able to do this. And this is just a VVT toric intraocular lens being implanted, not really relevant to this discussion, but I think this is a great lens when you have to offer excellent intermediate vision with the correction of astigmatism without any compromise on the quality of vision. In a posterior polar, okay, it's just a 1 minute video. Situation like this, you can see that we are creating only hydrodelineation, and I'm just there's no rotation of the nucleus. Again, the small division that I am creating, and then without any rotation of the nucleus, I'm just splitting the inferior heminucleus into 3 distinct segments, and then subsequently just removing each of those nucleus fragments. Once half the heminucleus is out and the capsular bag is decompressed, I'm introducing a little amount of viscoelastic, and then subsequently I'm going ahead and removing this nucleus completely, and then introducing the intraocular lens. I think my time is up. I'll skip this video. I think the points I want to make is with the technology that's available to us, it's not just the surgeon, but the patient also is comfortable. You have a low and a constant intraocular pressure right through, reduced tendency for surge, less energy, heat and fluid usage, extremely stable anterior chamber, friendly to the posterior capsule under the endothelium, and because of the incorporation of Ozil technology, less repulsion, more efficient. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm sorry, I think I overran a little bit.
Yeah, sir, Dr. Haripriya has joined. Yeah.
Okay, I think
you can request her.
Welcome, Dr. Haripriya. I think all of us are running between halls and getting delayed. I think she needs no introduction. I have learned a lot from her videos, and I think she heads the cataract department at the Arvind Eye Care System at Chennai. A prolific surgeon, has written extensively on cataract surgery, and it would be a pleasure to hear her talk about the Active Sentry platform. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you, sir, for having me on this panel, and also sorry for being late. So I'm going to be talking on the new technology from Alcon. So the title of the talk is Being Close with Active Sentry. So in terms of fluidics in phacoemulsification, there has been a gradual evolution more in the recent past. So we were all comfortable with the gravity fluidics. So those of us who needed more fluidics, we also had the hyperpressurized bottles. More recently, we have had the fortune of using active fluoridics, which basically uses compression plates to maintain the surgeon selected target intraocular pressure. And again, we now have the active sentry, which also works well with the active fluoridics. So in terms of the active fluoridics, basically it differs from the gravity fluoridics in that the bag goes into the bay behind the machine and the bag is compressed by two plates, and this helps to balance the inflow and the outflow. So this also helps greatly in the anterior chamber stability during surgery. So this is available today with the Centurion phaco system. In addition to this, we now have the active sentry. So this is a case which is being done with the Centurion system without the active sentry. If you note, my target intraocular pressure here is 60. So this active fluoridics permits the surgeon to have a target IOP, and the machine strives to have the IOP around that setting. And this is the big step forward from the gravity fluoridics, because we saw better patient comfort during the phaco procedure and chamber stability as well. So we also today have an advantage of having higher settings when we're using this technology. So this is a mature cataract. And though the IOP is set at 60, we would also have to additionally set in a parameter for the leakage compensation as well when it came to using the Centurion machine before the active sentry. I'm not sure why the video is...
I think we're not able to hear you.
Oh, you're not able to hear me?
Yeah, now it's okay. Please go ahead.
Are you able to see it now? And
Yes.
yeah,
Please
okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a case like did you not hear anything I said so far, or is it just for this video?
No, please carry on. Please carry on. Just a few words.
Okay. Yeah, so this is, like I said, the using of the Centurion machine without the active sentry in a white cataract, where chamber stability is very, very, very important because we don't have the epinuclear support in these white cataracts. So the CDE here is again lesser because of the help of the technology, which permits you to have higher vacuum and a flow rate. So today we now have the active sentry as a new technology available. So I have been working with the R&D team on this technology for the last 4 years before it was introduced in the market. And I saw an advantage. It definitely added to my comfort and enhanced the patient safety factor as well. Now this active sentry, the difference is that the handpiece feels almost similar to the existing handpiece, but the difference is that there is a pressure sensor within the handpiece. And now that it is close to the eye, the IOP is now, it's closer to what it was preset at. This active sentry also communicates well with the Centurion fluoridic system, and this also helps us to have a better chamber stability. The other difference in this technology is the aspect of having the quick valve technology, and this helps in real-time occlusion, break surge reduction. So this is one additional factor with this. And with the addition of the active sentry on the active fluoridics, the fluctuation in the anterior chamber is also greatly reduced. This fluctuation is reduced because of two major differences which we see with the active sentry. The first is that the machine now automatically censors the patient eye level. So one would not have to set it at, like, say, a +5 or -5, etc. So this is something which has now been removed. The second thing is the machine also compensates for the average incision leakage. So this is a big advantage because one can now set the IOP to be much lower, or can also have higher vacuum and flow rates for your more harder, more difficult cases. So this is a immature cataract, slightly on the harder side with the active sentry. So the IOP here is set at 40. So a similar grade before the active sentry, my standard IOP would be 60 with about 20 leakage compensation, which would mean more than 60 in actual surgery. So here when I have a lower IOP, it means so much more comfort for the patient. While I reduce my IOP, I still can use the same aspiration and vacuum settings, which is 32 and 475 for these immature cataracts. So with the sensor in the handpiece, the detection of this pressure is also real time. So there is much better response, and the chance of having surge is also greatly reduced. This is a mature cataract. So as I said earlier, in mature cataracts, we need to have a higher safety component because we don't have the epinuclear support. Again, my IOP is set at 40 with a similar vacuum and aspiration flow rate settings. Very important to have chamber stability in these cases. There's a higher chance of PC trampolining during the emulsification, but during the chop as well, it is more difficult for us to have control during the chop phase as well. So you want to have a very stable anti-chamber here. The torsion is at 60 using the Ozel technology. I do not use any longitudinal phaco, but the one which has kicked in is because of the Ozel IP, which kicks in when I use about 90% vacuum. So like I mentioned earlier, because of the leakage compensation, the IOP is said to be lower and the vacuum and flow rate is still the same. So there's actually no difference from what I was doing earlier. So I have the same comfort, which means there is actually hardly any learning curve involved while giving a safer atmosphere and better comfort to the patient. The third and the last case is a hard cataract. So as we know, with hard lenses, one would like to use higher vacuum and flow rate. I'm using about 600 vacuum here. With the active sentry, that is the one big advantage. If someone does not really, is not keen to reduce your IOP, for instance, one can just choose to have an IOP of, the same level, but have a much higher vacuum. So you can have about 30% more vacuum compared to your older settings before you use the active sentry. So with the higher settings, and again, a very comfortable IOP at 45, there is a very good chamber stability with this machine. The other aspect is that what I missed to show in the previous case is the number of times the active sentry kicks in. So the ASM is also shown on the metric screen end of the surgery, and it kind of gives us an idea as to how many times the active sentry was actually used during your procedure. And for example, it was about 2 times in the previous case, which means that the chance of surge was prevented in at least twice in that one case. So it just makes surgery a lot more safer for the surgeon when this technology is being used. So in cataracts like this, I think one knows the advantage of having a higher vacuum, because that way your CD also tends to reduce. So when you have higher vacuum and you have better holding capacity during your phaco or during emulsification as well, when you have higher vacuum, you find your overall energy level, which is used or delivered in the eye, significantly is lower, which means clearer cornea on post-op day 1. I also use chondroitin sulfate viscoat in all of these hard cataracts. So this also helps to have a clear cornea on post-op day 1. And I think with the pandemic, many of us have seen many more hard cataracts, mature cataracts in our practice. So I mean, this has kind of become much more common than it was in the past. And it's now part of a routine case now. It is when you have better technology at your disposal, it makes your procedure that much more easier to perform. I think for some reason the video is not playing up to the very end, but this just probably just shows that the CD as well in this case was about 15, which is again quite acceptable for a cataract of this density. So in conclusion, the Centurion machine with the active sentry handpiece enhances the phaco safety, consistency, and control. And it does this by reducing surge, by detecting pressure and providing precise adjustments to ensure consistency. It also helps to maintain the target IOP regardless of the PEL, because this is automatically set by the machine. And it also, you can work with different kinds of cataracts. For example, if you want to work on a lens subluxation with very low vacuum, this is the good technology to use. Also for cases with very hard cataracts where you need very high vacuum, this works well as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haripriya, for giving that very comprehensive coverage. And I think we have a fair bit of time for some question answers. Naren is there and
Yes.
Amresh. Okay.
If I can just add,
Yeah.
yes. So I think, I mean, wonderful, really wonderful to see all, stars doing all the, showing the surgical videos. Just a small tip for the trainees and fellows. Actually, I mean, the most, I would say one settings which is never used in these, high-end Alcon machines is the longitudinal phaco, especially these hard cataracts. If you just have a tinge of, basically what I do is I keep the longitudinal phaco about around 5 with a linear phaco of 5. And anyway, the IP is on. IP does a bit of longitudinal phaco also. But with this combination of this, I mean, believe me, you'll feel like it's a different machine that you're operating. The surgery with these really black cataracts, regular cataracts, actually you don't need anything. But in black cataracts, this actually does really wonders, actually, in fact. Sir, have you experienced the same? Have you tried that, sir?
Actually, I think, each of us explore the machine and establish our own comfort zone. And like I was mentioning during my presentation also, and for the chopping, I use only longitudinal phaco. I don't use a torsion at all. I feel that, buzzes in, worries into the meat of the nucleus much more effectively without any lateral movement, which sometimes may create a larger space than what you require and may compromise the kind of hold. Earlier, I was using 100% Ozil when initially it came in, but now I've modified this for the last 1.5 years or so. And when it comes to quadrant removal, is completely Ozil, and that's again at 60 to 70% or even 50% for softer cataracts. For harder cataracts, it's about 80%. And again, as far as IP is concerned, as Dr. Haripriya was also mentioning, I keep IP off during chopping because we don't want any repulsion to be taking place. We want the nucleus fragments to be coming there and getting a hold on it. But on the other hand, when it comes to quadrant removal, we go ahead and switch on the IP, usually coming in at 90%. I think that helps to reorient the nucleus fragments. So it's IP off, linear phaco as far as chopping is concerned, IP on, Ozil as far as quadrant removal is concerned. Your thoughts on this, Haripriya?
Yeah, so actually, sir, I use the my Ozil IP is usually on throughout the procedure for all cases. It's just that it may not just kick in when I'm using it on the softer lenses because the vacuum will not be 100% in those cases. Of course, it gets kicked in a lot more with the harder cataracts. Again, I have also tried the traditional longitudinal ultrasound with the Ozil, but I've been so comfortable with the Ozil, so I've stopped using longitudinal at all, except for the IP, of course. But I don't see a need because the cutting is, to me, with my technique, it seems to work perfectly fine. I use 60 as the torsional ultrasound, and that is my standard for all cases. With very, very hard, like the black coffee bean kind of lenses, maybe I would go to 70, 75 max, and this is my setting for the ultrasound. So I only use Ozil in all cases.
In hard cataracts, just for the sake of completion, though I keep it at 80%, it's on linear mode. So most often I don't go all the way down, and it's very rarely that 80% power is necessary. I quite agree with you that much lower power may also suffice, but it's really those hard cataracts when you could have the option when it's needed that you set it up a little higher. But
Yes.
one other simpler, just shifting gears more for the sake of the attendees, if somebody is on to infinity and very comfortable with that, and I get this problem even with some of my own surgeons, they have been so addicted to infinity, so comfortable with that, even switching over to Centurion, there's a little bit of a resistance. I mean, any tips for them, or of course, you would have made the transition years back. Do you remember how was it at that time?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so I think the transition to a Centurion from Infinity was not as big as moving on to the Infinity from the earlier platforms. I think the concept has to be understood. So before the surgeons use a Centurion, we would just talk to them about how it was different. But once they understood it, I think they just need a little time more to explore the machine, to know the benefit of the machine. So in terms of safety, obviously it comes in immediately. But if you want to really have an efficient, effective procedure, then I think if you want to explore, that's what the learning curve is about. I think just to know how they can use it for different lenses and what works for them. And that is what I thought took a little time. With the active sentry, for instance, I think there is no learning curve at all. I think it's just about, just going with a few parameters which are much lower than before. So it's about stepping down all the time, stepping down your IOP and working with your same vacuum flow and your torsion as before, and just seeing how it works for you.
Any comments in this transition, Naren, from you?
I would say is the main, I think the change between the two machine, I would say the fellows or the trainees, what they really make out is the foot pedal. So because we have a larger foot pedal in the Infinity, so they feel like they have more range as compared to the Centurion. But once they get used to, especially people with small feet, it's much easier, because otherwise the angulation of your foot will be like this on the Infinity foot pedal. But with the Centurion, it's much more comfortable. It's very easy to maneuver. I mean, definitely, it's just a little bit of transition.
And one factor which I noticed, which I also showed in my video, was that it's not just the hard cataracts where the active sentry gets actuated. Sometimes I found that fairly hard cataracts, especially with the sideways orientation of the tip, when complete occlusion doesn't occur, to my surprise, I find that active sentry has not even been actuated. But sometimes very soft cataracts where I have hardly used any phaco power, the actuation has been quite a few. Some, as I showed in one of my videos, it was even 14 times. And could you explain that, Dr. Haripriya, as to how exactly, what's the logic behind this?
Yes, I think sometimes soft cataracts, we tend to, but I don't know, my assumption is because we tend to have the higher vacuum and flow for that soft lens, which is not required, which can make it unsafe. And that is when I think the chance of surge is higher in the soft eyes. So we think soft eyes are actually safe and easy to do. But it's again about, all of us still have issues sometimes with soft lenses. So I think that's when the ASM would kick in more often. So it's with the harder lenses, we're probably a little more careful, and we would really focus more on the settings and the procedure. So maybe it may not kick in as often as you would expect it to. And as you said, sometimes you just don't understand. It may be 2 in one case, maybe 10 in another case, but it probably gives you a chance to introspect and see what was different.
Absolutely. I actually thought that, when this active sentry came in, this is going to be helpful to me only for the more difficult cases, the harder cataracts, and otherwise it may not be very important. But then when I look at the end screen, I find that even in so-called routine cases, it's actuated a few times. That means so often it has prevented a surge, preempted a surge, and might have added an extra safety belt to the entire procedure.
If I can comment, sir?
Yeah, please.
I believe, sir, is initially I also used to have like this kind of a random, showing that it has corrected so many surges. But I feel it's more of a bug, because once they updated the software, then immediately it correlated very well that in harder cataracts, obviously that's when you achieve the maximum vacuum which you are normally set, because sometimes you're operating at 700, 600 vacuum. You can achieve such high vacuum with these very hard cataracts. And that's where the huge breaks happen, from the high vacuum. When there is a sudden break in the occlusion, then it suddenly just drops, and there's a more chances of surge. So I feel with the new update, I feel it's showing the actual numbers correctly. That's my opinion.
Great. I think Dr. Haripriya also mentioned about this leakage compensation. I think that's a very important component. Leakage not only occurs through the main port, but even through the side port. Sometimes inappropriately constructed, you use a smaller Sinskey hooks or choppers, there can be a significant amount of leakage. So in these situations, I find that leakage compensation is a great tool. I myself was doing phaco through a 2.2 millimeter incision for a long time. About a year and a half back, I switched over to 2.4 millimeters, because I found that, introduction of the phaco tape, the introduction of the cartridges, the intraocular lenses was much more gentler when we have a 2.4 millimeter. So obviously there is some space in the sides where there's leakage might be happening, and the ability of the active sentry to compensate for that is, I think, a great tool. Your thoughts on this, Dr. Haripriya?
Yeah, I think that is true. So that is well said. Actually, like I said earlier, I had to have an extra setting. The leakage compensation for me was 20. So obviously my 60 IOP was not just 60, but actually more. Because you're actually pressurizing the chamber further. But now I think we're all on the same platform, and the IOP which the machine is targeting is actually what it is. So I think the leakage compensation will definitely add in a patient comfort level as well. I think there is one question from Dr. Leila Mohan.
Leila Mohan, yeah. Please take that.
Active Sentry compatible with Centurion with active fluidics? Yes, madam, it is. But I think it needs not just the handpiece, but also a hardware update, a software hardware update, along with the, it all has to come together. There's some, like I said, there's a change in the machine as well. So that's something which they will have to do in the hardware as well.
I think all the present Centurion machines are coming with the Active Sentry incorporated. But if you already have one, you can upgrade it. It's, as Dr. Haripriya mentioned, it's both a software and a hardware upgrade. But I feel having gone comfortable with it, now we are becoming more reliant on it. And as regards the IOP settings, I think both of us joined in a little later, and maybe Naren can tell us. I think Samri should have handled that. There are quite a few who talk about doing all their surgeries with 20. I personally went down to 20, but then I found that some of those eyes are really too soft, and 30 is where I stay with most often. And I feel that that translates to a bottle height of just 41 centimeters. I can live with that. And I found that some of your cases, you are going to 45, 50. Is there any basis on which you arrived at this number?
Yes, so like I said, 40 is the IOP I use in most cases. So the last case, the hard one, I use 44. 44 is the highest I use now with the Active Sentry. Like I said, 30 works perfect, 20 works fine. But normally, I think it is also the surgeon comfort. I mean, I normally like to have one setting which works for most cases. So I just have two settings in my machine. And that's the two settings I use for all cataracts, all steps. So I think the surgeon, what is surgeon comfortable with, which gives them that kind of a leeway for them to work amongst the different cataracts, different steps, etc. So even for the last piece removal or in terms of harder lenses, this 40 would be one setting for all. But I think 30 works perfect as well. So during the trial, during the R&D evaluations, we were kind of very ambitious. We tried the entire range. But in my routine practice, I'd like to go at a comfortable level. And that for me is 40.
I can understand that, Dr. Haripriya. In the time I take to set my machine, you will finish a cataract. So your thoughts on it, Naren? I mean, what's your setting like?
Yeah, yes, sir. I usually operate on high settings, sir. My settings are usually range from the vacuum being 700, the flow is 60. Again, phaco power is linear. And the IOP, just with the active fluidics, I used to operate at 30 to 40 range. But with the handpiece, integrated to it, my IOP has been 20. I mean, it's simply amazing that no matter what type, even in these kind of posterior polar and this, I mean, no matter what type of cataract, still, the chamber is nice, stable throughout. I mean, I found it really well. I mean, very comfortable with 20 as of now. But having said that, I mean, why? I mean, now we can say, I mean, these are all arbitrary numbers, 20, 30, 40. I mean, it's just that, all of us are trying to get to the number which is, a normal IOP. You don't want to get, go off the chart. That's the only aim. But at the end of it, I think since most of the surgeries are so short and so quick, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but it does make in terms of comfort of the patient.
I think, so you're saying that even for a absolutely soft cataract, you would use the same setting, 700?
Yes.
No?
Yes, sir, definitely, sir. Because in fact, sir, soft cataract, I always use that, sir, because my chopping I showed it in my the talk that I don't use a vacuum. I don't go to step 2 at all. In my chopping, I do it a mechanical chopping under irrigation itself. So I finish my chopping of my pieces under irrigation, and then actually it is so much more easier to eat up the cataract in soft cataract with very high vacuum. And in harder cataracts also, in fact, I know people would say, I mean, why are you training the fellows in that such high settings? When they're training under, I mean, when I train, I always use the same settings, the 760. The only difference I would say is, uh, you know, when you're trying to do your quadrant removal, that's where the mistakes normally happen, where the fellow tries to push the lens and then goes forward and tries to pick it up. He's not able to get it. He's not able to pick up with vacuum. But with high vacuum and high flow, what happens is even if you just touch it, it just immediately sucks it in and brings it up. So the holding, so what happens, the manipulation happens very away from the capsule. That is my whole thing. And I mean, touch wood, I mean, when my fellows operate under me, usually even with this high vacuum, nothing happens. That is because the machine is fantastic, does an amazing job. Because in these high vacuums, other machines, usually there'll be a lot of fluctuation, but this is absolutely stable throughout the surgery. And when you operate with this, you're making most of the job being done by the vacuum and the flow than the phaco power. That does the eating more.
I would very nice thoughts, Naren, but I would still
I understand,
have
sir.
a word of caution for, especially when you say about
Yes.
fellows and beginning surgeons, to start off with more modest settings and then go on to settings with which they are comfortable with. And we spend a lot of time talking about saving up on phaco energy, power, and reducing it. I actually don't constantly keep looking at the CDE or pat myself if I've done a hard cataract with a sub 10, because I feel that whenever energy has to be used optimally. And another factor I feel is that the amount of fluid going through the eye is also important. Do you think this the modifications in the Centurion, the active fluid X, the active Sentry, etc., has had any role in reducing the amount of fluid passing through the anterior chamber during the cataract surgery, Dr. Haripriya?
Yes, sir. Actually, I do think it has. I am not exactly sure why. I don't know. Probably because of having higher settings were required. I don't know why, but I think the amount of fluid usage is reduced. Maybe it's about 40 ml or so on an average. So the amount of fluid which is used is reduced. I think the other fact I also wanted to say is that I think is what we also set in, especially for someone who's just using the active Sentry for the first time, for the first few cases, is the irrigation factor. That also matters to, for someone who's just reducing your IOP to about 40 or 30 or 20, have a eye what the irrigation factor is. If it is like very low, again, you may have a difficulty with chamber stability when going for higher vacuum settings. So I have it at 1.7 today. So earlier when I started using it, it was at 1. And I had some issues with surge, some instability, which I don't have today. My irrigation factor is 1.7. So it matters from surgeon to surgeon, it could differ. But just one more point to remember.
While you're on this, why don't you mention about the IOP ramp that you have?
Yes, sir?
The IOP ramp?
Yeah.
I mean, what is it that you have in your settings?
It's 40, sir.
Okay. Okay.
So I think it's it starts from 0 to 40. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Any other queries any of you have? We have just a last couple of minutes. I think.
So if I can, the last comment, sir. If basically in terms of IOP ramp, see if you're playing with very high IOP, then you're worried about IOP ramp, because what it does is once you enter the chamber, turn on the irrigation, then slowly it increases the IOP to whatever intended IOP you want. But if since everyone has started using very low IOP, it hardly has any kind of role, because it's already already very close to your physiological IOP. So the role is slowly reducing.
I keep it at 1. I keep it at 1. I think overall it has been a great session, and I thank Naren, Haripriya, and Samresh for having joined in. I hope the delegates have benefited with whatever discussions we had. Great presentations, and thanks to Alcon for putting this together. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, speakers, for the excellent presentation. And thank you so much, Dr. Ramamurthy, for the wonderful moderation of the session. It was really a very descriptive and an insightful session. So with this, we conclude this session.